I've always lived by, like, if I'm the most talented person in the room, I've missed it. Because that's not how God has gifted me. God has gifted me to lead the best people in the room. I kind of look at myself as a music producer. Like, my job is to get the right people in the room and then lead them as a vision carrier from when they show up in the room to getting us to the final product. It's not my job to play the guitar part. It's not my job to play the drums. My job is to just keep casting vision and get us to where we need to be. And so, like, very transparently, like, everyone that I lead is more talented at what they do than I am.
Come into the light.
Shadow moves in the dark.
Congratulations! World's best cup of coffee.
What is it? Gaff tape.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to Coffee and Gaff Tape. I am Nate Anderson, joining you once again with my buddy Daniel Larson.
Hey, what's up, friends?
And if you haven't heard the show or watched or however you engage with your podcast, I hope one thing is really abundantly clear right away. The reason that we do this, the reason we exist, is to shine a light into the shadows of production and tell stories, explain the why, explain the heart, and really learn from our heroes. And really today is no exception to that at all.
Absolutely. We are returning to TC Nation, Transformation Church. Episode 1 was with the one and only Chad Vegas.
Not Chad Gilchrist.
Not Chad Gilchrist. That was last episode.
Should check it out, though.
Great episode.
Yep.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
But today we are talking to Pastor JerBear. Now, hold on. Give them a minute to wrap their minds around that.
Uh-huh.
Jeremy Van Valkenburg, production director at Transformation Church.
Yeah, super good.
It's going to be awesome. For sure. Really excited to get into, the heart behind why he does what he does. Even this idea of, representing, kind of like their mantra there at Transformation. It's going to be really cool.
Yeah.
But speaking of representing.
Yeah. Should enter the self-flattery portion of the episode.
Well, you know what, Nate? I kind of view this as a way to help shine more light into the shadows.
That's fair.
This isn't about us.
Yeah.
This is about them.
That's fair.
Okay. You cool with that?
Yeah.
All
Let's
right.
read the review.
All right. Let's not have an argument, okay? Just kidding. Okay. So, H_Davis01. If that's you, let us know. DM us, Twitter, whatever. Carrier pigeon. We accept those.
Yeah, I guess so.
Let us know.
We do now.
Let us know that that's you. And we're going to hook you up with something nice because you left us a review on Apple Podcasts. Okay, here we go. Title is inspiring. 5 stars. Being in church production is a very thankless job, which is why we created this podcast.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Listening to professionals and guys in the trenches of all types of production share their why and heart behind what they do is very encouraging.
Man, love it.
Boom.
That's it. That's the reason why. Thank you, Mr. Davis, if that is your real name. Could be first name, could be last.
Could be. We don't know.
But yeah, definitely reach out. And if you enjoy what you hear today, we definitely encourage you to do the same. Please like, comment, share. That's how we get the word out, and that's how we can keep doing more of these.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You got it. Should we get into the interview?
Let's do it.
All right. Here we go. All right. We are here with Pastor JerBear. Pastor JerBear, Jeremy Van Valkenburg, production director at Transformation Church in Oklahoma. Welcome.
Dude, thank you guys so much for having me be a part of this. I'm just going to say it right from the beginning, we are fanboys of Resi here at Transformation Church. And they're not paying me to say this, but they have saved our tails a couple of times. We were just talking, we had a moment a couple months ago where we lost internet for 16 minutes. But the minute we kicked internet back in, the stream picked right back up where it left off, and our viewers didn't miss anything. Awesome. And we were all high-fiving and running around. Resi's the greatest. So yeah, dude, I'm super honored to come and chat with you guys because we're big fans of what you do.
Man, so thankful to have you.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. Okay, so we typically start out these interviews with a question that's like, who is, Jeremy Van Valkenburg? But I'm just going to deviate from that pattern just a little bit. How did you get the nickname Pastor JerBear?
Dude. So I am an ordained pastor, and I'm a large man. Like I'm not. Let's just. So, at Transformation Church, our culture code is like it's really a part of all that we do. And so one of our culture codes is hot. We are humble, open, and transparent. And so, yeah, I'm a big dude, and I kind of am a teddy bear. And so JerBear kind of stuck at the last church I was serving at. And then I just thought it was super funny. So it's like, it's my Xbox gamer tag. So
Perfect.
So when I'm playing Fortnite, it's like, you just got eliminated by Pastor JerBear. It's like,
awesome.
That makes me giggle. And so, yeah, everybody just calls me JerBear because I just, I'm kind of a big teddy bear.
That's
so
awesome.
That's amazing. Thank you. That was more of a personal question for me. I just
opens up a lot, though.
Yes, yes.
For the
all my gamer friends, look me up on Xbox. Love to play.
Absolutely. All right. So now let's get into the other question that we typically ask. Who is Jeremy Van Valkenburg in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, so I am a father. I'm a husband. I'm just a man that loves Jesus passionately and believes that through the uses of technology, like we can really see the gospel go further than it ever could. Mm-hmm. And I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not a whole lot. I'm just trying to love my Jesus. And so, yeah, that's who I am. I've been married for, I think we just celebrated our 16th anniversary.
Congratulations.
I have a son named, thank you. I have a son named Miller who we adopted in the middle of COVID. Wow. We have a kind of a long story of what it took for us to be parents, but we waited 14 years to be parents. And now I have the most perfect, beautiful little boy who is a daily reminder of God's grace and sovereignty. And that never forgetting that no matter how hard the path is, like it's not useless. God is always using what you're going through to shape where he wants to take you. Yeah. And so like, every day when I'm gonna get a little emotional, but every day when I wake up and that little boy smiles at me, I'm reminded why I go out and do what I do is because I want other people to understand that God is for them, God is with them, and that no matter what your story is, he's using it. And so, that's kind of who I am. Man. So,
wow. I love that. That's so cool.
Beautiful.
So Pastor JerBear, as a husband, dad, father, technical leader, what brought you to this place? How did you end up in the shadows of production?
Yeah. So I'll be super honest. I always thought I would be a senior pastor. I'm gifted at a lot of things. I'm probably the most gifted thing I do is preach. And so it's been weird. All the churches I've served in outside of Transformation, not only was I production director, but I was also the second called up if the senior pastor couldn't preach. Wow. And so I always thought my path would take me in this way. And so I was at a church, this is about 10 or 12 years ago. I served for a while as like the assistant to the worship pastor. And I knew enough about the tech to be dangerous and to help our technical director. And so she decided she wanted to start freelancing. And so I was in meetings, to help find out who was next up. And somebody just randomly said, like, why are we not just hiring Jeremy for this position? And I was like, huh. And so I kind of went home, prayed about it. And my wife and I were like, I wonder if this could be something. So I went from being in the room to hiring someone to being in the room to be hired. And so in 2014, I got into church tech with really no background at all. I didn't go to school for this. I didn't tour. I knew how to patch on the console. Now go out and make it sound good, kind of a thing.
Yeah, sure.
So it was a long grind of getting up at 5 a.m. to show up at the church before anybody else would with virtual playback and learning how to mix and grabbing a threshold on a compressor and going, what is this actually doing? And they're like, oh, now we want to live stream. Great. And so it was YouTube University just trying to figure out. And I would sit at the feet of anyone who would be willing to share what they knew how to do. And every tour thing that came through the small town I was in, I would go volunteer just like, hey, can I just come put your lighting rig together? Like, and be a hand and just kind of grinded. Like always believing that God like had something special for me down the line, but I knew I wasn't ready for it then. And so like, I just did all that I could to continue preparing myself so that when the moment came that God revealed what his larger plan was, I would be ready for it. And so, so did that for about 10 years. And then the Lord released us from that church. And then I went to another church where it went from like kind of smaller production to suddenly like many moving fixtures and Midas Pro X's and large PAs. And it was this massive jump from we're doing production, but it's definitely not what this church is about to, no, we really want to use production to grow what we're doing. And we were at that church for about a year. And very early on, we knew that God was just going to have us there for a season. And so it was a crazy thing. The day that we knew God had released us from our former ministry, I got a text message from a church in Mississippi asking if I would consider becoming their production pastor. And I was like, okay, let's walk this path. And so we started talking to this church in Mississippi, and it was beginning to like, oh, wow, God, you really were preparing me for something kind of large. And so in the midst of that, I just happened to reach out to Lee Fields, and I was like, hey, Lee, this is a much bigger thing I've ever been a part of. Will you kind of help walk me through the interview process and salaries and benefits and all that kind of stuff? And so one day he just randomly calls me. He's like, are you really going to move your family to Mississippi? And he's like, I thought you loved Florida. And I was like, bro, I love Florida. Like, I don't want to leave the ocean. And he was like, I just need to tell you about this church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I was like, okay. So he kind of tells me, and I had never heard of Transformation at the time. I'd never heard of Mike Todd. And so I kind of started looking, and I laughed. I called my wife and I was like, hey, so Lee wants me to talk to this church. And I explained it. She looked at the Instagram and I was like, there is 0% chance they're going to talk to me. Like, maybe they will just because Lee's making a connection. And so that day I took a call from a gentleman at the church, kind of did our pleasantry. And I said, like, here's the deal. If you were looking for the world's best tech guy, I'm not your guy. Like, there's a lot of people way more talented than me. But if you want somebody to lead the world's best tech guys, I'm willing to have a conversation. And so, again, I was very humble, open, and transparent from the beginning.
Right.
And I just kind of shared like my heart, and then we'd have another interview. And I would go in. I've never been more vulnerable about this is exactly who you're getting. I approached every interview like, you're not going to hire me after this interview because you're going to learn everything about it. And at the same time, I was still talking to this other church, and I ended up flying out to the other church. They offered me a position, and I just knew that God was calling me to Tulsa. And so I called up my wife, and I was like, I walked out of the church, and I was like, this place is amazing. It's some of the nicest people I've ever met, but God's going to take us to Oklahoma. And she was like, all right, let's go. We said yes to coming out here before we even saw Tulsa, before we even saw the church. We were so convinced that God was in this that, and so we just celebrated a little over a year being here. And so it has been the most stretching thing I've ever done in my entire life. And it's been incredible.
That's so cool.
Wow.
So I love that. And just even in your interview process that, you know, like you said, I think it might've been before we started, but the HOT, the open, honest, and transparent, like that was just you through the whole process. And like,
they knew exactly who they were getting.
Yeah. Was production even something that like when you were early on kind of in this pastoral, like, you know, when you were in, I don't know, in you know, college or whatever, was it like something like, was production even on your radar, or was it just something that you were thinking it was going to be ministry for sure?
No, my degree is in transformational Christian ministry.
Yeah.
Like, I thought I was going to be a senior pastor. When I originally got into working in church, I was leading a college ministry. And then Lord deviated me on this crazy path. I really didn't get into I had done a little bit of production, but I was 34 years old when I took this position with little to no experience.
Yeah.
And so I would have never guessed in a million years that this is where I would be sitting. And quite honestly, even when we were praying through like what was going to be next for our family, I was praying like, God, like, I'm ready to be a senior pastor. Let's go do this. You know, like, and I applied at a few churches as a senior pastor and never heard a thing back. And then this is where God brought us. And again, I never would have ever dreamed that. But I've also, like, as I'm here, I'm like, okay, I'm also the happiest I've ever been in my professional life doing this thing. So, yeah, never would have guessed this is where we would have ended.
So cool.
Wow. That's amazing. Okay. So you talked about how you got into Transformation Church and that kind of a process. And I loved how you said, uh, in your transparent way during that interview, you're just like, look, I'm not the best tech director that you'll ever be able to find, but I do want to lead the best tech people. And so that aspect of leadership, like, what has that been like? What's the biggest challenge maybe that you've faced over the past year or so that you've been there? And then what's like the reward out of those challenges for you?
Yeah. So this first year was, I'll be like, I'm open and transparent. That's what we do.
There we go.
The devil tried to get me with insecurity because but over the last couple of months, I started reading this book that one of our video guys shared with me, and it's called The Supernatural Ways of Royalty. And it's really about beginning to understand who you are in Jesus Christ as your identity. And so one of the things that God has really been challenging me in all this is like, God could have called anybody else to lead these superstars, to lead the Avengers, is the way sometimes we like to laugh about it here. But he didn't. He called Jeremy. And so I've had to go through a really long process. Little fun fact for me, I get up every morning and I walk, and I use that time to pray and get my heart right and get my head right for the day. And God really challenged me with it was time to start laying down my insecurity and start picking up my crown. Mm-hmm. Because my reality is I may not be the most talented warrior that we have, but God called me to be a prince to the princes. And so my job is to lead them from where they are to where God wants them to be. Because I'm good at casting vision, and I'm good at I can be a vision carrier. And so being able to lead the team, resource the team, and be okay with they're more talented. Go let them be great. God called you to do this thing. And so that's been really one of the biggest things God has been really sharing with me is lay down your insecurity. I chose you for this, and pick up your crown.
Yeah.
I love that because to me, at least, it's so tapping into those pastoral qualities that you've seen in yourself and that you've desired to be. It's just God kind of turning that on its head and saying, no, you're not going to lead a congregation. You're going to lead a production team with those talents. So I see that as really, really cool.
And I think just an important reminder, and even just everything along the process that, I think as leaders in tech, we can get so lost outside of, the vision of the ministry or whatever we're doing in the church tech world to kind of lose scope of what the impact actually has on the ministry, and that it is a ministry in and of itself. Mm-hmm. The people that are running cameras are worship leaders, and really extending that ministry throughout everything that you're doing, technically as well.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, okay. So you're in charge of this, fast growing church called Transformation. Yep. It sounds like you took this position, just after, kind of COVID had hit and all this different stuff. What was that like, stepping in to that kind of space and that time period, and kind of picking up the reins and starting something from scratch, maybe in a way?
Yeah, it was. There was not really an in-house production team when I got here. So Transformation's doing all these crazy big things. And when I got here, they were really relying on Daniel Cannell from DC Pro. So DC Pro is 2 miles from the church. And so they really were the production team when I got here. And so we knew coming here that God was going to use us to have to build something from scratch. I would literally once a week, I would actually go to Daniel's shop for the Transformation Church production meeting so that his guys would know, hey, we need 2 more multi-views in the arena, and we have to do and they were the ones carrying it out. And so we were working off of rented cameras and rented switchers, rented risers. It was kind of a mess. And they had gone a period of time without anyone as the production director. So there was nobody for me to even talk to figure out how things were. And I mean, we're still a year into this and we're finding out, I didn't realize we were doing it that way because of these different things. And so, man, it has been a long, long process of building a team, to carry out what God is wanting to do here, because he really put it hard on my heart. Like in some ways we want to do things a little like differently. Like we were looking for guys who love Jesus Christ as much as they love their craft. So like the expectation, and we have a high level of expectation at Transformation Church, but like so one of the things I believe is that like there is a point where talent and anointing come together, and it's at that intersection where God moves the kingdom forward. So we have a lot of people who might have like a ton of anointing, and so that's here, but maybe they're not really, you know, super great at what they do, and that's here. Well, God's only going to move the kingdom forward where those two lines intersect. And so if we want to see God move in an incredible way here, we were looking for people who like their anointing is here, but the level what they do things are here, because this is the level we want to see the kingdom of God move forward. And so it really was a process of like figuring out who, like the type of person that we were going to be going after, and then just doing everything we could to guard that. And so, you know, a lot like the amount of miles in my neighborhood praying for our production team, definitely adding up. And it's great because like I have a bad back and stuff. And so I'm getting stronger, which is we're thankful for. But it's been crazy, and it's been really hard as we're in this first year trying to build a team and build culture, because again, culture is very important in transformation, because like we really believe culture is felt before it's heard.
Yeah.
And so like as contractors are coming in and people are coming in, like there's a certain way that like we want to make sure we translate who we are as a church. And so it's been half contractors, half DC Pro, you know, half the small team we've been starting to build. And so it's been a wild ride trying to build all this, you know. And so our team is getting larger, and we finally, you know, got to hire an audio director and a PM to work with me and a couple other guys. And so like it feels like over the last like 3 weeks, we're starting to get a groove of what this is actually going to feel like, because we kind of actually have a team.
Yeah.
So it's been absolutely nuts.
Jeremy, I know, you know, we obviously love to talk about, or, you know, what we talk about mainly on this podcast is the heart and the heart behind why you do. But I'd love to even just hear a little bit about transformation too. And like, you guys are really pioneering in terms of, you know, what we all see, a lot of really creative things over the past year. Can you even just kind of walk through that? What has that process been looking like? I know you mentioned arena. You talk about lots of crazy things, and we're just like, yeah, you guys have an arena. So what does that look like at Transformation? What did that look like a year ago? And what are some exciting things that you guys have been developing during that time to where you're going to be going next?
Gosh, when I first got here, we were streaming from the arena in COVID, and then we had to do a massive construction project in the arena to help keep some sound in, because we're very close to a neighborhood, and we also like it loud. And so a massive undertaking to keep sound. And so we ended up moving from the arena to our lobby. And so if you've watched Transformation Church at all, when we were in that big kind of U-shaped LED wall thing that we did, that was actually in the lobby of the church.
That was the same one you guys flooded the stage too, right? At one point,
we did flood the stage. That one of my favorite moments was, so we were flooding the stage for a merch drop. So we had this whole blackout collection that came out last year, and because we really believe highly that fashion is an area that the church doesn't seem to use to bring about like conversations about the gospel. And so we kind of have this whole Represent brand that you can see I'm wearing right now. And so like many times you'll be out and about. So Represent, what's that all about? And suddenly I was just given an open door to tell them about Jesus Christ. And so we take that really seriously. And so we had done this whole water floor thing. And so we had a meeting with Pastor Michael about a video. And I was just like, hey, real quick, I want to talk to you about Sunday. And he's like, yeah, what's up? And I was just like, so we're going to have flooded the space. Do you want it cleared, or do you want to preach from it? Because we knew he had this sermon coming up about Peter being in the boat and all this kind of stuff. And he was like, give me more details. I'm like, so here's what we can do. Like, we can make it look like it's raining. I'll be able to float you in a boat. and you'd be able to preach through like what it's like to be in the middle of a storm, and we kind of cast this vision of we can make it look like it's lightning and a hurricane on the LED wall. And he's like, he just was sitting there and he goes, yeah, I'm gonna need all that.
I'm gonna need all
He was just like, I want every single, and we were able to pull it off, and it was an incredibly impactful message. And so kind of the things we've been doing is just because everybody's watching service on a screen now. And we've been able to do a lot of really cool stuff. You'll notice we do a lot with a handheld during a sermon. It allows like to really get those intimate moments where Pastor Michael can just get up there and really talk to the audience. And so we're just trying to look for more ways that when we do allow people back in the room, when construction's done and we're ready to roll in this building, of like telling the story to the people in the room and telling the story to people like at home.
Yeah.
And then also trying to figure out more water floor worked really well in a studio environment, but how do we still take our illustrations to a level like that will also translate to the people in the room as well as the people at home? And so a lot of things we're working on kind of in the shadows that we're not really talking about quite yet of how we're going to make some of those things accomplished. But I know you're going to hear me say prayer a lot. And I don't want you to hear that as a Jesus juke. Or like, oh yeah, transformation, they're praying. Prayer is literally the sauce of everything this church does. We do monthly fasts. Like you will go to a facilities meeting where the walls of the church get prayed down before we even start talking about where chairs are going to go. Like we really believe that so the Lord's Prayer says, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So innovation is very important to us. Mm-hmm. The reality is all the ideas of what's next are already happening in heaven right now. Mm-hmm. The reason sometimes I feel like as the church that we're not figuring out what's next is, are we taking enough time down on our hands and knees asking God, you already know what the next big thing is that's going to impact the kingdom of God. Being willing to sit and get quiet and listen to what the Holy Spirit is sharing. And I'm just being like that's what happens at this church. Like I can't even begin to explain how much we dive in to hear what's next from the Lord. Because if it's just ideas that come from man, they're going to fall flat.
Yeah.
But when the Holy Spirit brings that inspiration, brings that innovation, those are going to be the things that one day it's going to turn around that the MTV Movie Awards they're doing things that they saw happen in a church, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Because as Christians, we should be the most creative people on the planet because we are intimately connected to the creator of the universe. So we have a cheat code that most people don't seem to want to fall into. We get on our hands and knees and we ask, what is next? How do we honor you and represent all at the same time? If you're willing to sit and listen, he's going to share with you what's next. And so we have a huge desire of being innovative because we want to be the ones setting the tone for what's next because we have a cheat code to the creator.
Yeah. That's so cool.
Pastor JerBear. Pastor JerBear coming in hot.
One question I do just want to extend from that too. I think obviously, one thing, and this gets a little bit touchy too, but one thing that you often see, I think, as almost a hesitancy towards innovation from some churches, just because they have a fear of being irresponsible or a fear of being, not stewarding well. What's kind of what's your reaction to that? Because I think there is a tension there a lot of times with church creativity of hey, I want to push this forward. I want to innovate and I want that to come from inspiration and I want it to affect people. But I also don't want it to be too flashy, or that's the concern from the pastor or whatever. What do you do with that?
I think it's just, it's coming to a realization that you can honor God and be innovative at the same time. Let's look financially. So one of the big things that we've talked about, water floor, that costs $600.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to look at it and go, oh, I wish I had that budget. It was hard work and $600. That was a combination of cinder blocks, sandbags, and 6 mil plastic.
Yeah.
And 1 part can-do attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to make it rain, it was literally PVC pipe with sprinkler heads and a hose.
So cool.
Like it was $600 in material and time to put that together. And the impact that it made was just insane. I honestly believe, and Pastor Michael talks a lot about this, I think a lot of times innovation doesn't come out of excess. It comes out of when there's a need.
Yep.
So there was a time in Pastor Michael's life where it's like, they didn't have money to do cool stuff or whatever. Now he's written books and he's done this and he speaks and all that. So like he can get online and order the new pair of Yeezys for his wife right now. But the things that meant the most to Pastor Natalie was back when he didn't have the things, and he would drive around town and take pictures of date sites and then put them in a book and then give that to her. Like, it was when there was not plenty is when all of the innovation really came out. Yeah. And so like you can throw a million LED panels at something and 1,000 lights at something and a big PA, like, yeah, that's cool. But like when really innovation comes out is like when you take all that away and you only work with what you have to show what's next. And then just realizing that, like, again, you can honor God and you can still, because like that is the balance that we walk through all the time of what we do. So like one of the attributes of God that we know is he's immutable, right? Like he's never changing. So the same God of the Old Testament that literally smote someone down for touching the Ark of the Covenant when they weren't supposed to, that is still the same God that we serve today. But also like we have grace and freedom in there to represent how we share the gospel to people using the technology that we have. Like you can still honor who God is, and that same God that we see in the Old Testament and the New Testament in a way that would speak to people, and they would come. Like if you look through the live stream chat, you will see on Transfer, you'll see professional athletes, gamers, celebrities. Like there are people hearing the message about Jesus Christ. And one of the things, if you listen to Transformation, Pastor Mike holds no punches. Like if you sleeping with people you shouldn't be sleeping with, he's going to call that out. If there's sin, he's going to, like, we do not back away from any of those things, but we put ourselves in a space where people are willing to come in and listen because we're able to speak a language that they understand and then give super hard biblical truth all at the same time. And if it wasn't for that innovation, we wouldn't be able to have this audience that we get to share this gospel message with.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I love that idea of like holding both at the same time. Like you can be innovative and you can bring biblical truth in that same space. Like they're not mutually exclusive in a way. I think it's super helpful for anyone, regardless of budget, regardless of, scale of your church. Like you can bring that perspective into your everyday, kind of like, daily job. Yep. I feel like that's awesome. Okay, so I want to just kind of rewind just a little bit. Towards the beginning of our conversation, you had talked about, kind of like your and your wife's kind of like journey of parenthood and what that kind of looks like. And so one, I'm going to ask you to kind of share maybe a little bit about like what that was, what that story was, but then also the reason is, I feel like so many production creatives are walking through difficult times and still having to do their job and produce at a high level and pursue excellence and all this different stuff. And yet like real life is real life. And so if you could share maybe a little bit about your story and kind of what happened there. And then also, if you could help us understand like, how do we learn from that type of season, how to take care of ourselves, how to grow through that, and if you could just share that, that would be amazing for us.
Absolutely. So, my wife and I got married in 2005, and we knew pretty quickly we wanted to be parents. And so we got married in July, and in January, my wife got pregnant. And so things were going great. And we were about 23 weeks of pregnancy. We knew it was going to be a little boy. I had gone out surfing on a Sunday morning, and Shark Week had been on, and I had watched a lot of Shark Week. And so it was like one of those like kind of foggy mornings in like good ways. And I was the only guy out that morning. And I kind of freaked myself out. And so I like go back to my Jeep and I pick up my phone, and there was 23 missed calls from my sister-in-law. And so in that area where I was at, it's out on the barrier island. There's just no reception. And again, this is mid 2000s. So, cell phones are not what they are today. And so I'm driving down A1A at like 100 miles an hour because I know something's wrong, and finally get hold of my sister-in-law, and she's like, hey, you need to get to the hospital. Something's wrong with the baby. And so get to the hospital, and they bring me back to my wife. And when we first got back there, they weren't super concerned. They thought maybe she had a urinary tract infection or something. If this is too much, edit out. But basically what had happened is she had gotten up and she felt like a limb had fallen out of her. And so they took her to the hospital. Nurse was like, no, it's just, you're not having a baby today. Don't worry about it. And so suddenly then my wife started having contractions, and they brought the doctor in, and the doctor checked her, and he was like, not 1,000% sure what's going on, but you're fully dilated at 23 and a half weeks. And he said, we either got to get you to West Palm or Orlando, because if you deliver here, the baby's not going to survive. We don't have what it takes to keep them living here. So crazy mad dash to get my wife to Orlando. And my dad picks me up, gets me up there. And by the time my wife gets to the hospital, she goes from a triage room to a birthing room, then to have a emergency C-section. And my son was born 35 minutes after getting to the hospital. And so they had put me in a little hallway, and they wheeled Caleb by, and he was the tiniest thing I had ever seen. He was 1 pound, 11 ounces. And he was about 12 inches long. And so we get into the hospital room. My wife finally comes out after having the C-section and stuff. And we were told our son, because of how early he had been born, had about a 25% chance of surviving. And so we fast forward to day 3, and I had gone downstairs to just check on the baby and see how things were going. And nurses were frantically working over him, and they were like, you need to go get your wife right now. And so I ran back upstairs, got Lori, and I brought her back down. And they did some tests and stuff, and found out that there was some bleeding on his brain that had begun to happen from some experimental treatments that they needed to try, because he was struggling to breathe on his own. And so the one thing you don't want to hear when you're in the NICU is it's time to hold your baby. And I had a doctor look at me in the eyes and tell me that he felt like it was time to hold her child. And so we had to make a really difficult decision. And so I had to walk over and ask the doctor to take our child off life support. And he ended up passing after 53 hours. And so it was not awesome afterwards. There were many days where my wife would be great, because she was a teacher at the Christian school that was at the church I worked at. And she'd look great all day, and we'd get home, and I would hold her for hours as she just cried and was mad at God, and trying to get through that healing process. And so 7 years go by of us trying to get pregnant again. And finally my wife gets pregnant again. And so again, things were looking good. And so we had just had all kinds of tests done to make sure like the baby looked good and all that. We were told clean bill of health. And about 14 weeks, we went to a doctor to see about a procedure that would help prevent what happened last time from happening. And we went to that doctor's appointment, and he was like, hey, do you want to hear the baby's heartbeat? And we were like, absolutely. And I couldn't find the heartbeat. Mm-hmm. And so we went to a radiologist, and we come back, and the doctor said, I don't know what happened between last week and this week, but the baby's passed. And so he pulls me aside and said, it doesn't have to be today, but in the next 2 days, your wife's going to need to check herself into the hospital, and she's going to have to deliver. And so we checked her into the hospital, and she ends up delivering around midnight or so. And at 14 weeks, far enough along that you could tell it was another little boy. And at that point, for the second time in my life, I've had to watch my wife hold her dead child in her hands. And I'm be hot. Like, I had about 48 hours where I thought about giving it all up. Like, I'm just like, dude, I've been faithful. I'm leading ministry. I pray every single day. And even when Joshua, so we had Caleb and Joshua is what we named our boys. Like, the minute we found out Lori was pregnant, we took her before the elders and we had her anointed in oil. I was on my knees every day for 30 minutes praying over that child. Like, they're probably, and this is, I'm like, not a flex, but there's probably 1,000 people praying for that little baby inside of my wife. And when he passed, I was like, what's the point in all this? And I remember whenever I get to that point in my life, I always just open up the Bible and I started reading about Paul bit by a snake and this and throwing all like, and I was just like, if he can stand strong, I can stand strong. And I began just to read a lot of verses, like in realizing like, where does my citizenship lie? Like, why am I putting my hope in these things when my hope is in eternity? And so started, trying to have a baby again. And then my wife had 2 more miscarriages. And then we did the testing to find out that there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to have a baby. There's no reason explaining miscarriages. And so we ended up getting some pretty intensive counseling as a couple. And we got done with that. And my wife came to me one day and was just like, where are you at with this? And I was like, I need to be done. I can't carry this anymore. And she's like, I'm there too. And she said, can we look at adoption? And so we immediately got into the adoption process. And so at this point, we're thinking, all right, like, Lord, it's been 11 years. We've been faithful. Like, you're going to bless us. I know this is just going to be super easy. And it was not. Just going through the process was very, very difficult. It's not often you have to sit down and go, hey, what drugs am I okay with my baby being on when they're born? Like, these incredibly painful decisions that you have to make along the way. And so we get into it, and we were in the process of waiting for, I think, almost 2.5 years. And at one point we found out that there never had been a pastor and a teacher that had ever waited that long for a child. And so another low point was there was a situation that came through where the parents were looking. There was a little boy, and they were looking for a family who would raise their child to love music. And I was like, this has to be it. Like, my wife is a singer. I do production. Audio is my thing. It's what I love more than about anything. It's where I feel closest to Jesus. Like, this is it. And we didn't get picked. And I was destroyed. I'm like, I don't understand at this point. And then that next week, another situation came through, and it looked good on paper. And so we said we wanted to be shown. And so on a Saturday night at 7:45, I get a phone call, and it's the adoption agency. And they're like, you've been picked. And I literally fall on the floor sobbing.
Oh my goodness.
We were getting ready. This is dead in the middle of COVID. So we were going to my wife was the dean for a Christian high school. And so we were doing a Zoom dance, and it was 80s themed. And so it started at 8. We get this phone call at 7:45. We're freaking out. My wife is in full 80s garb. We have videos of her like leading all the dances, and I'm DJing, and she'd be like, mute it. And it's like, hey, we need to get a crib, and we need to get this. So in that conversation, like, so when do we meet the parents? And they're like, well, actually, you're picking the baby up tomorrow at noon.
Oh my God.
Whoa.
So and we had less than 24 hours to prepare to bring a baby home.
Wow.
And so we ended up adopting our son. And again, like, I will go on and on about the reminders of God always has a plan when your story feels like you don't understand and it feels useless. Like, it's not useless. God is using it to grow you. He's using it to reveal himself to you. So like, I don't know, like, whatever you're going through when life is hard, like, you have to keep in mind, like, whose you are and where your citizenship lies. You are a citizen of heaven, and there is nothing that the world can throw at you, that the enemy can throw at you, that should ever get you to the point where you would give up your eternity. Because what we're experiencing is just temporal, but like, eternity is eternity. So we're living for that moment when we stand before the creator of the universe to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. Like, if that is your perspective, then you kind of can get to the point where it's like, you know what? It hurts and it sucks. But, like, I know that God's working this for my good. Yeah. And one day when I get to eternity, like, what I love to tell people is like, this side of eternity, I don't know why God took my boys already. I don't know why, but what I know for certain is when I get to the other side, I'm not going to care.
Yeah.
Because when I'm on that side and I'm now in this moment where I'm worshiping the King of Kings for the rest of my life, I'm going to look back at, like, you ever hurt your back? And that, like, day or two where it's just agony, it feels like it's never going to end. And then it goes away and you're like, oh, maybe that wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Sometimes that's the perspective. Like, it hurts while we're here for now, but when we're standing before God and getting to worship him forever. And I look over and I believe my sons are there. Like, I believe that I'm going to see them and they're going to come up and go, Dad, we're so proud of you. Like, that's what I live for. That's where I find my perseverance and the endurance to take one step in front of the other, even though, like, if you look at my family, I should be an alcoholic. I have no business being where I am right now. I should be divorced. I should be an addict. But for some reason, God has chosen me to be where I am. And so keeping that as my perspective and as the end goal in mind, I'm kind of like, go ahead and throw whatever you like. You've taken jobs from me. You've taken my kids from me. But you know what? I'm going to be faithful because I know you're for me.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I just think there's so much to learn from that situation that you and your family have walked through. And it truly is an honor to hear you share that. So thank you for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to talk about it along the way. So I'm an Enneagram 7. I don't know if you guys are Enneagram guys at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So as a 7, like, I do everything I can to avoid pain.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I can have a tendency to do is just to, God is good, gloss it over, Jesus, you know what I mean? Because it's easier for me to go there than to actually deal with the pain. But what you didn't realize is I went 10 years doing that, and I never actually grieved the things that I needed to grieve, that the Lord was big enough for me to be upset over, that the Lord was big enough to walk me through. And so, like, I think the Lord's like, hey, great job. I know you love me and you understand that, but, like, deal with it.
Yeah. I think
so. Like, if you're struggling with things right now, admit to it, get some help, talk to somebody. It's okay to deal with those things. God's big enough.
So, okay. So then because again, I know that there are people listening to this that are going through something, and talk to us a little bit about, like, how did that affect, your job, your day to day? Like, you couldn't sit in a house and just stay there, like, all the time. Like, you had to go back out. You had to, like, do the things that you needed to do. How did you walk through that? How did you handle that? And were there, people that came around you to support you as a community? What was that kind of like?
A lot of times it was having to just put one foot in front of the other. And then it was having people in my life that I was willing to open up the door to let them know I'm struggling. And so my son, his name is Miller, and the worship pastor that I work with at my last church his name's Randy Miller, and his family walked with us through all of the hurt, all of the things that, like, we knew, like, I could walk into his office, sit down, and just be like, I'm not good today. Well, what's going on? 6 years ago today, Caleb died. And we would pray together, and I would get hugged. Like, you have to be willing to be open. If you try to just bottle it up and deal with it all inside, that's when people implode. That's when we turn to porn. That's when we turn to food and alcohol. Like, if you're not willing to open up and talk about the things that are going on, you're going to try to find release somewhere. Like, so the first thing I think is that, like, is just being willing to admit I'm not okay. Like, the Lord, at least in my life, has always provided someone to walk with me. Like, we might be introverted. I know I'm very atypical as a production guy. Like, I'm an extreme extrovert. Like, I know I'm the exception, not the norm. But even as introverts, we need people. God called us to be within community. And so you have to be willing to open yourself up. You're not going to look weak. You're not going to not look macho. Like, if anything, people are going to thank you for allowing us. A lot of people, they want to walk with you on the journey because they're going to need somebody at some point. And then suddenly all these people that have helped you, now you can go out and be a blessing to other people.
That's
really good.
Awesome. I think everyone can take a lesson
Absolutely.
from that. I mean, yeah, it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah. And just that perspective too of shifting out from, your picture of what this ideal perfect situation is going to be for you as a production tech leader or whatever, and being okay to be vulnerable, being okay to open up. And I think that's a great example, man, as a leader for your team too, just to set that tone, set that example within your ministry, I think is really cool.
Yeah.
Well, and I just want to say, like, senior pastors, if there's any senior pastors that are people who are leading tech guys, like, part of the burden of what we do is we are graded on a 2-letter scale. It's either an A or an F. Like, for some reason in production, we are not given grace. we're being hot. A singer can go out and have a bad morning. It's like, well, looks like they stayed out maybe a little late or they went to Disney the next day and we don't. But like if we miss a cue, there's just not the same grace that seems to be given to production leaders around the globe. And so what ends up happening is we end up getting so focused on not making mistakes. We put our identity in our skill set and not in being able to have a safe place to make mistakes. Now, I'm not saying we're not shooting for excellence, because like church leader, I'm going to tell you right now, your production guy felt it harder than you did. And so like create a place for people to not be okay to make some mistakes.
Yeah.
Because if not, that's when they're going to hole in, they're going to make their identity about their skill set. And that's when problems are going to happen.
Mm-hmm. That's really good.
Wow.
So I know he mentioned Enneagram 7. I think that might lead into another part of your world that I'd like to maybe ask about.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay.
Yeah.
So we talked to Brian.
Tabor.
We'll just call him worship leader props. Okay. Cause I know there's a connection here. Talk to me about, how you guys cross paths. We heard Brian's side of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden he said, like Pastor JerBear, like he was there. And my mind was blown. And so I was like, so how did that all come about? I know that you and him are really, tightly involved in Experience Conference, which I think is like either going on right now as we're recording.
Today's the last day of the conference.
Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe kind of take us on that journey about like where do you and worship leader probs like intersect, and how did that come about?
Yeah. So remember when I told you about being vulnerable?
Yes, sir.
So my worship pastor that I was working with at the time was very close friends with Brian Tabor. They'd gone to college together. And so we had just made the decision that we were no longer going to try for a child and that we were going to adopt. And so Randy texted me and said, "Hey, you're there with Tabor, right?" And I said, "Yeah, haven't really had a chance to talk to him yet, but I was going to go introduce him." He goes, "You may want to talk to him. God, for whatever reason, never gave them a child. And so maybe have the conversation with him of what would it look like." And so I went to Brian. I just said, "Hey, good friends with Randy Miller. I work at this church in Vero. You actually paid to be a pastor there at one point. I'd love to talk." And I kind of shared where we were at. And he goes, "I would love to sit and talk." So one night when we were in Dallas for the Experience Conference, ministry team stuff, I shared my story and he opened up about their story. And it just turned into, we started texting and then we just more and more, we grew closer and closer and closer. And so the following year, we're back at the conference and he just out of nowhere goes, "So I see you follow worship leader probs." I'm like, "Yes, I love that account." And he goes, "It's me." And I was like, "Shut up. That's not you." And then he pulled up his phone and he got an Instagram and I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're Mr. Worship Leader Prob." And so we were just, at the time we were talking and he was like, "I'm really thinking about starting a podcast. Do you know anything about it?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm actually doing I used to do another podcast that you can't find anywhere. It was terrible." And so we tried to arrange any memories of it actually happening. So, but I knew the technology side behind it. And we just started talking. I was like, "Yeah, I can help you get set up." And I was like, "I know this is random, but I've hosted a podcast before. So I didn't know if like you're looking, it might be kind of cool to have conversations between a production leader and a worship leader." And so he was like, "Dude, yes." And so we ended up starting a podcast together. And then I got into start helping kind of building some memes and things along those lines. And then it just kind of kept growing and growing and growing. And at that time we were using the whole like, "Help us get to 50,000 followers and we'll reveal who Mr. Probs is."
Yeah.
And so we got to that milestone, and then some coaching stuff came out of it. And then just being on the Experience Conference thing together. But it was this amazingly cool thing and opportunity. But it started with me being vulnerable about my story.
Mm-hmm.
Look at that.
So God used my vulnerability to say I was struggling to then give me this platform to be a voice for production.
Absolutely.
Had I not been, if I would have let my pride get in the way, I could have missed out on a massive God opportunity.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Wow. Unbelievable. I'm never gonna hear the word "hot" again.
No.
and not think of that.
Mm-hmm. It's so good.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, let's just be out there. Like, if we're not going to talk about truth, then what's the point? You know what I mean? Like, how are you actually doing? Like, don't put a facade on. You can only wear a mask for so long.
Right.
And then it gets uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Okay. Well, we are getting towards the end of our conversation. But there's two questions, we definitely want to touch on. That we always ask is one, like, is there anything that we haven't talked about that, before we were going to sit down to record that you're like, oh man, I really wish I hope we talk about this, or I hope I get to, share this. Is there anything that you'd want to share, maybe that last 10% that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, I would just say leaders. This is something God is dealing with me on a lot right now. I understand your influence. So, like, I don't care if you're the production director of a mega church or you're a volunteer tech guy running Pro Presenter on the weekends. If God places the title of leader on you, there is a weight that comes with that. And so, like, I think a lot of times, like, for me, I have really understood a lot of so we made a decision at Transformation when I got here. We needed to buy audio consoles. And so we went with Yamaha PM10s. So we went with the Ravage series. I know of 15 other churches that have made a decision to get PM10s because we did. So, like, I think at times we understand what that level of leadership is. But I think sometimes what Lord's really been reminding me of is the people I'm leading, the people I post to on Instagram. Not only am I leading in like this leadership wise and also leading in like gear choices and all that stuff, but how I live out my Christian walk, I am also teaching people how they're going to frame up their image of who God is.
Yeah.
And so, like, yes, that's the platform God has me on, but let's take that down to a volunteer tech guy in a church. Let's say you have volunteers even underneath you, like how you speak to your pastor, how you honor the people around you. You are leading the people around you to see who God is and how to walk out their own walks with Jesus Christ. And so I'm just really, God has been taking me back to a lot of my journals that I had where I was praying through like what I believe God wanted this to be and just reminding me of the fact that like the gear is cool, leadership's awesome, but at the end of the day, what I'm going to be held accountable for is how I loved people and how I modeled Jesus. And so, like, if you don't play yourself into thinking like, as long as I do these things good and like it's a good product, like that's great. But like the reality is the Lord's more concerned with like, how are you showing him to everyone you come into contact with? That's what's going to be the lasting reminder.
Well, you answered my second question too. So, no, that's I think one of the coolest things. One of the things I'm going to take away from this, and just getting to know you over this time recording is like, your why is on your sleeve. Yeah, and you are so honest and open and transparent about that. That like the question gear is great, but like, what's at the heart of what you do? Like, why do you do what you do? Like, I feel like this entire podcast was an answer to that question. And so I just really appreciate that, what you bring to that. I mean, not everyone is like that. And I feel like it's, it really is an example to, and you had mentioned this before, about like how the typical production person is more of an introvert and they're in the shadows because they like the shadows. They don't like the spotlight. They don't like, the attention to be on them. And yet I feel, like your attitude and the, just like your personality and the way that you present, the real things going on in your life is such an inspiration. And I feel like we can all learn from that for sure.
Well, and I want to make sure though, I leave like it's balance. Yeah. Like everything in life is about balance. Like I almost didn't make it up here in time because we had just put in all the Kinesis load bearing deals on all of our chain motors. And we were literally finally able to fly it up and we're all staring at the computer and like, dude, touch it. Can you actually like, so we love gear. Right? Yeah. Like, like we had a Furio show up the other day. Like we cannot wait to get that thing out, but like it's balance. Like you can have the gear and do the cool stuff, but like don't miss out on this is about souls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like what you're doing, you're trying to get this to the point where somebody hears the gospel message of Jesus Christ and they go from one day their destiny is set for hell to now they're going to heaven. Like use the gear. I think Craig Goschel says this. We will go as far as anything that is not like up to sin to tell people about who Jesus Christ is. I'm so down with that. Like I love all that. But if you miss out on this is about the gospel of Jesus Christ and people's destinies. Like it's balance. Yeah. That's all that, like, that's what I'm trying. It's balance. Love gear, post your gear, love Jesus, post about Jesus.
Yeah.
I love that.
How would you encourage somebody who wants to model that for their community? I mean, I think, or wants to create that type of environment. And I think the way that you're modeling it for your community is awesome. But like, how does somebody begin to start that process in their ministry where they're like, you know what, I'm feeling burned out. The people that I'm working with, my volunteers are burned out. Like, where does that start? How does somebody begin that process?
Dude, I think just taking them back to like, what's the plot? Like, what's the point of all this? Do some just random worship nights. Do some prayer time together. Like, go out and just walk. Spend like. It's not like this. You're not going to find a book. You're not. It's just recommitting in your heart. Lord, I'm giving this back to you. All the places, Lord, that like I try to make this about me, or like cut it out of my heart. Be open to the Holy Spirit to allow Him to start making changes inside of you, and like it's going to hurt. Breaking hurts. Like the reality is, like John 15 talks about, like you're either being cut off or you're being cut on. Either way, you're going to be cut. So which one would you rather God just cut you off, or would you rather have Him just be open to go ahead, Lord, just cut anything that's not like you, cut it out of my heart, and be open and obedient to the things where He's like, I have a list of things in my phone of ways that God has been telling me, these are the ways I need you to honor more. And this is going to sound so dumb. I love to play video games. I used to watch a lot of Twitch. I used to love watching guys play Fortnite. And God very specifically came to me and said, I need you're spending more time on that than you are with me. I need you to cut that out. And I have a choice that I can either be obedient, or I can be like, well, maybe I'll just cut it back. But that I remembered, like, oh, I did pray and ask the Lord to reveal to me the things He needed to cut out. So I'm just going to be obedient to that. And now I have more time to actually be engaged with my family. Not hold on. I want to see if they win this bet. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so it's just be willing to open yourself up. When the Holy Spirit prompts, be obedient. It's going to hurt, but every time refining happens, you're going to be more pure and more usable by the Lord on the other side.
Yeah.
Wow.
Awesome.
Whew. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for spending this time with us. I wish that we could just keep recording all day. Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like this happens like every podcast. Mm-hmm. I just don't want it to end.
Yep. We're definitely due for a visit up there, though. We get it.
Oh, absolutely.
Check it out sometime.
Absolutely.
Oh, 100%.
All right.
We'd love to have you guys.
Cool. All right. Well, Pastor JerBear, thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you again soon.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Man, is there really anything better than just to say stay hot?
Oh my gosh, dude, I cannot I can't think of that word and not think of Pastor JerBear. And and it really is so true though. And I know this is going to get back into what we were talking about before, but just that idea of like, as production, like we have a tendency to be more introverted, to hold things more close to the vest, to walk in with that mask,
right,
and just do our jobs. Mm-hmm. Whether you're a volunteer, whether you're on staff, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. You walk in, and the shadows of production almost like enable that. Yeah, almost give you like a free pass. Yeah, at kind of like keeping, things inside and bottling things up, and yet, what Jeremy was talking about, I think is so important. And it's almost a way to prevent that burnout that we all feel. Right. Is that, being honest, being open, and being transparent about what's going on in your life. And almost in a way, it almost calls out the leaders of those production teams and volunteers and to encourage that,
Mm-hmm.
to create space. Because so often I feel like we can, especially in production, we can just like get in that mode of like, okay, Sunday's here. Let's go through the cue sheet.
Right.
Let's get this done. Let's, chase after excellence for Jesus. And like, and yes, like that's all good.
Yeah.
And yet there's another side of, production leadership that, that you're called to like, make that space available for people to be honest, be open, be transparent. And I just love that Jeremy tackled that topic for us.
Reframing your perspective on more than just the day-to-day.
Yeah.
And realizing that what you're doing, even the littlest task, has eternal impact.
Yes.
And realizing that innovation and excellence matter in that.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can continue, you can go on your day and do a half decent job at anything, and make it through your life, make it through your work, get a paycheck, go to bed, and watch Fortnite videos on Twitch. But like,
right,
is that actually making you a better person? Is that making the people around you better? Does that have an eternal impact?
Which I think is cool. That it does kind of go back to that, he's wearing his represent sweatshirt. And I just think that's so cool. That like you see that, and like I love how he says like, fashion is like an untapped
thing. I thought that was really interesting.
And yet like it's not just about the look.
Right.
It's not just about the fashion. It's because it's something that they're living out.
Yeah. And
like they are representing the gospel to those around them. And like, that just expands the purpose, whether you're in production or whatever, like that expands your purpose than just the task at hand.
Yeah. It takes something like a $600, water floor from something that's just, hey, this is something that's cool that we want to do.
Right.
To like, there's purpose, there's intention behind this. We didn't just do this because it's cool. Yeah, it is cool. And we're okay with that.
Right.
But like, what is the bigger purpose? How are we representing through this?
Yeah.
I think is a really big piece for sure.
I love that.
It's cool.
So don't forget, follow us, like us, whatever, review us, support us. No, not support us. we don't
Patreon.
No. We're never doing that.
No.
But seriously, us hearing back from you guys, whether that's, comments on YouTube or, even if you want to drop us an email or whatever, reviews on iTunes, like that is a way for us to know, how you guys are doing and how you guys are, being impacted, not by just what we're doing, but, our goal here is to create value for you.
Yep.
And so we just hope that this podcast is accomplishing that for you.
Absolutely. And don't be a stranger.
Yeah, don't be a stranger. Ooh, that's a good one. Nate, with just the...
You haven't heard that one?
I've heard that one, but we've never used it here. So
well, that's true.
Don't be a stranger. Don't stay in the shadows. You deserve to be highlighted. So thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you.